Welcome back to Kathy Beale and I with more political astrology. And I am Louise Edington of Cosmic Owl Astrology. My website is louiseedington.com. I also have a publishing website, sacredthreadsimprint.com, where you can buy pre-order signed copies of my book on series. I've sold quite a lot of copies already. It's going really well. So go and order your pre-order. It's out on August the 12th, so officially on Amazon if you don't want a signed copy. And I think that's all for now.
Hi, everybody. I'm Kathy Beale. My website is empowermentunlimited.net. I have a Patreon, patreon.com/Kathy Beale, where I have a monthly Ask Me Almost Anything and many other fun things. And my YouTube channel is Professional Aquarian. Oh, also have a page on Facebook, Empowerment Unlimited, but more importantly, a group called the Astro Insight Lounge, where there's a lot of discussion of astrology on the ground. So a lot of what Louise and I do here ends up being discussed in that group. And there are also a lot of ridiculous jokes.
And it's one of the few Facebook groups I will go in because I don't.
Thank you.
Oh, anyway, I'm wearing my own t-shirt today.
Oh, my.
I have merch below, but I don't usually bother telling people. Anyway, I just thought I would tell people today. Anyway, we're going to dive in. Kathy's got the news. I'm going to add a bit of news at the end, and then we're going to kind of tell you what the aspects are coming up. And we're only going to look at two specific charts really today. Well, three charts, but one of them's how they speak to each other. So anyway.
As always, the reason I do this is to demonstrate how astrology is playing out in the news. It's not to replace, although people use it for that, your own access to news. So in the last week, since our last video, we had a playing out of, this is what the general aspects were, Venus and Uranus meeting at the end of Taurus. So shocking, different, disruptive, breakthrough, things involving money, resources, possibly even the ground. And this happened with Saturn stationing retrograde. And at that moment, the budget reconciliation bill passed with the greatest redistribution of wealth in U.S. history. So that Saturn, Neptune retrograded, Neptune station retrograde at this. Saturn was at its retrograde station degree, but Neptune retrograded. Neptune rules the waters. And we had flooding in the Everglades ice facility, incredible flooding in the Texas Hill Country. Venus, which rules the populace, women, our general mode, little girls, trining Pluto, Lord of Death. There were a horrific number of deaths, including lots and lots and lots of teenage girls. And there's a lot of arguing over the adequacy of notice in light of budget cuts. That all ties in astrologically. The Mexican president, who is a woman, sent rescue teams, Venus trine Pluto. There were many AI-generated reports of various celebrities donating funeral expenses and more. That's the Pluto and Aquarius piece. There has since been flooding in Ruidoso, New Mexico, Wilmington, Delaware, Philadelphia, D.C., and Utah, Chicago, and Japan has horrible rains going on. And add in today's Capricorn full moon, and there's a permafrost collapse that has led to flooding at the border between Nepal and Tibet. So that's one big area. Now,
can I just add something to that?
yes.
Because with Neptune and Saturn stationing retrograde so close together, the words wall of water kept being spoken. Saturn, the wall, Neptune, the water. It just, you can't make astrology up sometimes. That's all I wanted to add.
All right. Well, all right. Consistent with all this, right after the budget reconciliation bill passed, Republican representative from Tennessee, Mark Green, resigned from Congress. Didn't just say, I won't run for re-election. He resigned. Musk announced the formation of the American Party over the budget bill. White House staffers leaked to Salon magazine their concerns about guess whose physical and mental deterioration? Iran claims to have hacked into the White House and have 100 gigabytes of staffers' email, which it's threatening to reveal. More Venus trine Pluto. The Department of Justice now says there is no Epstein client list. Pam Bondi said in February that she had it on her desk. It releases surveillance footage from outside Epstein's cell during Barr's time as the head of the DOJ. They said the cameras were broken. Now there is footage, but it's missing a minute.
And Trump said he never knew Epstein, didn't he?
And Trump is, well, he's also done other things, other things. So now the Department of Justice and the FBI have closed the case. Meanwhile, on Truth Social, Trump has been screaming in all caps about stop talking about that. We have people dying in New Mexico. All right. Now, bunch of
Panicking
immigration,
much?
really, a bunch of immigration related issues that play out everything that we've been talking about, and also the fact that the South Node in Gemini, which is a point of release and what we're moving away from, is sitting on Neptune in the US chart, which has to do with, and it's in the ninth house of foreign relations, policy, foreigners but so it has to do with immigration, it has to do with racism. Neptune's a planet of ideology. Okay, so a federal court refused to dismiss Kilmar Abrego Garcia's suit for wrongful deportation. A Tennessee court, he's got criminal charges in Tennessee, which is what the DOJ used as their excuse for bringing him back. The trial court there has put a gag order on the administration because they were saying things about him and the case. El Salvador told UN inspectors that it has no control over the U.S. deportees at the CCOT facility there. House Dems introduced a bill to prohibit ICE agents from covering their faces. Got more ICE agents showed up in tactical gear on horseback and with tanks, blah, 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 in Los Angeles's MacArthur Park during a children's Southern camp. The mayor, Karen Bass, told them to go. They actually listened. The Los Angeles Police Department chief has ordered police in LA to check credentials of people claiming to be from ICE, and LA has now sued DHS and ICE. And you might recall last week I mentioned that there was a case about birthright citizenship, kind of related to this, before the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court put in question whether a nationwide injunction was possible, and like maybe a class action suit would be the way to go. All right, so the plaintiffs in that case immediately that afternoon amended their complaint to have for a class action suit. Just now, the federal court that's hearing that certified the class and issued a nationwide injunction. So this will be fun to watch. Three more things. There's a temporary restraining order blocking the budget reconciliation bill from revoking Medicaid funding for Planned Parenthood. The American Academy of Pediatrics has sued RFK Jr. over changes in the vaccine recommendations. And in the Venus-Pluto, we'll see what's happening here department, Trump has put 50% tariffs on Brazil, and he's demanding that the criminal prosecution of Bolsonaro be stopped. Meanwhile, in South Korea, the president who was impeached has been arrested for the second time. That's the news. That's playing out astrology. And Louise has more about things that are going on in Russia.
Yeah, but I wanted to bring in Russia because we mentioned last week that the Saturn-Neptune conjunctions always bring change in Russia. Well, first of all, there's lots and lots of reports. I'm not going to go through them all about the Russian economy collapsing, reports of loaves of bread being cut in half in stores because they haven't got enough for people to buy, so Russia has this past history of these kind of food lines and things like that because of their economy, because they their actual economy is as small as Spain, I believe. It's like so small. But the other thing I wanted to mention is that if you've been paying attention over the last few years, but particularly since the start of the Ukraine war, there's been quite a lot of mysterious deaths. And just the latest ones are the former Minister of Transport, Starovoyt, I don't know if I'm saying it right, and his deputy are the latest high-ranking Russians to die in suspicious or unusual circumstances. And so that's, that's coming up again. At least 20 prominent individuals, including government officials, military officers, prominent businessmen, have passed away unexpectedly during this period since the war began, and that's only in just over 3 years, right? So I don't need to talk any more about that, but we are going to look at Putin's chart because it's hard to get clear news out of Russia, but it sounds like he is desperately trying to hold on to power, really. So, would you say?
Oh, and his chart's being
Oh,
activated
which
every
is what
which
we're going
way.
to show. Yeah.
Right.
So, shall we look at that first and then go on to the?
Well, should we talk about the astrology that's rolling out
Oh,
next? And then,
oh, sorry. Yes.
oh,
Oh, Gemini moon and Uranus opposing my Mercury. I completely forgot that. So the transits we are going to kind of coming up over the next next 2 weeks really. July the 13th, Saturn stations retrograde. Following Neptune, they're kind of moving together. So Saturn stations retrograde at one Aries, and so these two are both going to move back into Pisces. But they are traveling together most of this time until they have their conjunction early next year, back in Aries. So Saturn stations, like Neptune stations, are big turnarounds because they're slower moving planets. So having them together, the wall of water, you could apply that to the floods and metaphorically, kind of this wall of kind of washing
mhm,
structures away, right? So,
mhm.
yeah. And then going to July the 17th, we are going to be looking at the good trouble rallies that are planned for that day. And on that day, we have a last quarter moon. So the moon will be in Aries and the sun's in Cancer. But this is not any last quarter moon because it is square to, or the moon is conjunct Eris and the sun is square Eris, which in many ways is the epitome of good trouble. So we'll talk more about that when we look at the rally chart, I think, and where that's showing up for that. But I think it's a pretty good day for standing up for the outsiders and those that are being harmed. I do personally. And the next day, July the 18th, Mercury stations retrograde at 15 Leo. And, there's always a big hype about Mercury retrograde online. It seems to have died down a little bit over the last year or so. But the points around the station, again, are often very wonky, reversals, things like that, particularly around the station time, in my opinion.
May I interject something here?
Mm, yeah,
On the 17th, I believe we flew by Saturn and Uranus coming very close to, I'm sorry, Saturn
oh,
and Neptune coming very close to a conjunction.
yeah,
So while this quarter moon, the third quarter moon is in the final testing phase of the Cancer new moon, is that a good way of putting that? It's
yeah,
like,
yeah.
well, it's in the final, what are we doing with this? Saturn and Neptune, both retrograde, come very close. I mean, for all practical purposes, they're conjunct. They're just not conjunct by degree. So we get a preview of something that's going to lock into place at the end of February next year.
And Saturn's being the faster moving planet will move away from Neptune briefly in big terms. Right. So, okay. So on to July the 20th, Mars will conjunct the South Node. Now, please don't step into fear, but Mars conjunct South Node can be a little bit of a nasty aspect. It can bring up a lot of kind of issues, shall we say. The last time Mars was conjunct the South Node while Jupiter was in Cancer was the year of 9/11. That's not to suggest another 9/11 will happen. Lots of different things in the chart, but it's a pretty big deal happening with this all at the same time. So please don't project fears because these things don't happen in the same way. But it's a big day. So 22nd, Eris. I'm including her because of her part in the Good Trouble rallies. Eris stations retrograde on July the 22nd. So the rallies are on the 17th, which is only 5 days before Eris stations retrograde. She's pretty slow moving planet, so she's already in the station retrograde zone on the day of the rallies, getting prepared to cover old ground. So I think this is going to bring more turnarounds. That's also the day that the sun enters Leo. And then on the 23rd, we have Venus square Mars. But remember, Mars has just been conjunct the South Node. So really, they're kind of all speaking to each other. That's going to be fun for me because it's at 21 degrees Gemini, Virgo, squaring my 21 degrees Sag Sun. But but that's a square, the women versus men, or if you want to talk about like kind of the old rules versus like being more caring, there's lots we'll say about that, I think, as well. Do you want to add anything to that square?
Uh,
It's
well,
mutual, so it's going to bring
but it's
change.
also a demand to get moving on stuff because when
Yeah.
Mars moves across the South Node, we'll be working on concepts of release. We might be overthinking a lot of things because the South Node is in Virgo. The South Node is what we're moving away from. So we'll be working on old things, old barriers, old walls, maybe, old boundaries. And then with Venus in Gemini, which is a sign of multiple possibilities,
Mhm.
pushing against that, we could have a real groundswell of we're going to do things differently, or we are a diverse people and we will change how we've been putting these limits in place.
Yeah, yeah. And I see signs of that emerging already. I've started following Tad Sturmer on YouTube, and he's doing all these videos about how the founding fathers created the Constitution consciously as a republic to exclude anybody other than white men. Because, of course, many of them were slave owners and so on. So you don't have to agree with me. Go and argue with Tad if you, because there's been this tendency in the USA, speaking as an outsider, to mythologize these founding fathers. And yes, it was of their time, but also they were founding it to the Constitution and everything to protect their own interests. He maintains, and I kind of agree with him. But anyway, so it's Sturmer, Stoermer, if you want to go and listen to him. July the 24th is also a big day because we have a Leo new moon that is opposing Pluto. In other words, the sun is conjunct Pluto the very next day, the moon opposes Pluto. That's at 2 degrees Leo Aquarius, which is just a shade away from the last Mars-Pluto opposition. So it's going to bring up some stuff around that, I think, as well. And this is also aspecting Neptune and Saturn, and, well, obviously Pluto as well. So all three of these planets that are going to be speaking to each other over the next few months as they all change signs together. So this is a heck of a new moon, isn't it? So,
I'd like to add two things.
mm,
So, about the new moon, a new moon is a time of setting new intentions or the next phases of whatever you've been working on. And this one is going to have us incorporating the what we're seeing in the changed circumstances around us very much. And it's in the sign of the self. So we could be redefining ourselves, redefining a lot of things.
mm,
Keep in mind that it's in the sign that Mercury is now retrograde by that time. Now it's not gonna cross over that point again, but there
but
could be issues with that. And going back to that Mercury retrograde stretch, I just want to point out that from the 13th to the 20th, as we have these different bodies moving into their retrograde stations, that the turnarounds happening so simultaneously, Neptune still slowly turning around, Saturn, uh, Mercury, and then Eris,
Yeah,
all of that digs. It's like a swirling, digging deeper
it
in,
is.
and it could have an element of, or add a really strong streak of things getting slower momentarily amid all the chaos, kind of like you're falling down a tunnel and you're seeing all these things flying. So it could be an Alice going down the rabbit hole moment, with being almost like slow-mo, all this crazy stuff happening, but you're watching it very, very slowly.
Yeah.
I think that's very important that all those retrograde stations are happening so close together and that the Saturn-Neptune meeting occurs in that stretch. So
And
whatever is going on then
mm,
will play out. It's not going to be just that moment, like, oh no, we're coming back to this. We're coming back to all of it.
oh yeah. And can I add one other thing? Because Uranus has just moved into Gemini. That's going to be frustrating as hell because Uranus in Gemini moves fast. It wants fast change. It wants things to change really quickly. So whilst you feel like everything's like, it's such a great description, that tunnel, uh, you may be feeling really frustrated and saying, I want this change now. But so will others, of course. So, mhm, yeah. So, anyway, let's look at Vladimir Putin. I'm going to put his chart up with just today's transits around him because, but well, as we speak today, the sun is right on his Uranus, bringing change. But also, if his chart is correct, there's not always agreement about Putin's chart because he's a very secretive ex-KGB and all that. But I'm using the commonly used chart, which Nick Dagan Best, the human ephemeris astrologer, uses. I think it's been proven to be right over time. He has the moon in Gemini, 2 degrees, the people. Uranus is not conjunct yet, but it won't be exactly conjunct until it's been back and over his moon. But two hits on Uranus, kind of radical change, radical change. I left a couple of asteroids in, and we'll look at all of these things, by the way, in a minute. But I just noticed as well that he's just had a Vesta return, and Vesta is the state, the hearth, and Vesta is going to move over and cross his Venus. So there's definitely, all of this speaks to me of him definitely kind of being under stress, feeling like his power is under threat. But the biggest thing is we've got this full moon, like, coming up like in just a couple of hours or so. And let me move to that, and it's right on his Uranus. So I will just put the full moon exactly on for those that can't just visualize it. So there you go. The moon is, and the full moon is on his Uranus, basically. And I mentioned last week that Putin, Russia, whichever, invaded Ukraine as the Venus star point on January the 8th, 2022, rose into the sky. And the Venus star point is often associated with war. And that is in my world, because I work the Venus star point, is often associated with an invasion or going to war. The Mayans actually timed their wars, I believe, by morning star Venus star points, but it's also square his Saturn. Look at this full moon. I think his days are kind of numbered because he's really under pressure. There's lots more I could say, but I'm going to let Kathy add some stuff. See.
Well, there are two things, 2 points in the chart I want to focus on. So you brought up his moon. Lots and lots of activity with his moon. Currently, Pluto at 2 degrees Aquarius, transiting through his third house of communication, is exactly square that. Um,
Right.
so things could be coming out. There could
Right.
be, or
That's a
could be
trigger.
deadly consequences for people who speak up. There could be
Mhm.
challenges to the alliances that he has. I will also point out Louise uses one system called Porphyry for the
Mhm.
house system. I use Placidus, and in Placidus, his moon is in the eighth house of other people's money and investments. So that would be more of an oligarch streak to it. But regardless, there is something powerful and transformative going on, and it's not going to stop because Pluto is retrograde and it's going to ultimately come around and hit that moon again, which is already having contacts with the other outer planets. So besides Uranus going back and forth over it, Uranus will exactly be on his moon in June of 2026. So we have a nearly year-long process going on of pummeling that.
Mhm.
Look down in the fifth house, which is it's
Mhm.
risks, okay? Games of chance, risk, that's one way of looking at it. We've got so Neptune retrograde is exactly sextile. The Saturn is it's part of the sextile as well. And so that's opening an opportunity. I mean, I don't know if this means he's gonna take a risk with war, if there's something else that will be really big that comes out of that. So just know that, and that's going to go back and forth as well. And some of that isn't going to become absolutely clear until earlier next year as part of the stepping stones to Uranus actually crossing and like
Mhm.
sitting on his moon in the middle of the summer of 2026. But meanwhile, let's look at Jupiter in Cancer in his eighth house of investments, other people's money. It's also a house of criminality. Jupiter is moving into a square, pushing, amplifying his sun, which is currently under stress in this full moon, Jupiter is going to square his sun mid-August, and then at the end of August, mid-September, it's going to square his Neptune. His sun and Neptune are in the house of where backroom things happen, but it's also a house of institution like hospitals. Okay, so
Mhm.
there could be an
And
illness
prisons.
and
Prisons.
prisons. Well, I think it's much more likely. I don't
Yeah,
see
I think
Putin
it's
ending
no.
up in prison. He might be hiding. He might be hiding in a dacha somewhere. But that Jupiter hitting those two things could really limit his mobility, limit his visibility, limit his being able to go out in the world, and increase the probability of something involving his health.
And to add to what you said about Jupiter coming up to square his sun, on August the 12th, the day my book comes out, Venus, Jupiter, and Sirius, the son of our sun, are all conjunct at 14 um, Cancer square his sun. So that's, maybe, women. Because one of the videos I was watching says, why aren't the baboons out marching this time again? Because all their men are being killed in the Ukraine war. Well, maybe they
Hmm,
will. Maybe they'll start rising
it
up with
will.
them. Mhm. But there's a lot going on there, basically. That's really putting him under major pressure. I just do want to say that Pluto is trine his moon, not square. It's
I'm
like,
so sorry, so
yeah,
sorry.
yeah,
That was
yeah.
my
No,
no trying. So that's like there's nothing impeding the change,
yeah.
nothing impeding the flow.
Mhm. But this is going to keep unfolding, as Kathy said, because I mean, look at this as well. Jupiter is opposing his Chiron at the moment as well, so it's kind of opening up old wounds, probably around the structures and things. I bet there's a lot of people challenging him in the government, in the structures of the government that we're not going to hear about, right?
Mhm.
But maybe that's why people are dying mysteriously, let's say. So, more people again. And there was one other thing I was going to say. Can't remember. It's fine.
Well,
Doesn't
let me
matter.
point out a number and maybe that will trigger something for you to think about. Mercury is currently at 13 Leo and it's exactly trining his series. And Mars is at 13 Virgo and it's in an adjustment aspect or an
Mm.
inconjunct to his series in the sixth house of the daily way of doing things. There's a big issue about scarcity, about food, right?
Yep,
That's what you were
yep,
saying about the bread.
yeah, yeah, definitely. Yeah. And remember that Mars and the South Node are coming up to meet, which we talked about, and that will widely square his series. Mars will square his natal series first in that house of shared resources, secrets, dirty deeds, power struggles, all kinds of things like that. So, yeah. So even though I mentioned what happened last time, Mars and the South Node were conjunct and Jupiter was in Cancer, it could hit a different place than last time. It could hit Russia because of what else is going on in Russia. So,
I'd say his alliances are very, very shaky right now.
well, we
With
even heard Trump has backtracked on sending arms to, right? So,
well, we'll see what happens with that.
oh no, I don't trust a word that comes out of his mouth.
But at
But
least he said that, right? Yeah.
and he has been, blathering on about Putin, says good things and doesn't follow through or something like that. So, you know, and not that I'm giving him any praise. I don't believe for 1 minute that he didn't know that Hegseth was stopping the arms to Ukraine. Do you?
Um, I can't believe anybody does anything without him telling them to do it.
Exactly. So, watch this space. If, like me, you have an interest in what's happening over there. I have a friend in Kyiv, so I always follow the Ukraine story really as closely as I have time to do. There's a great guy on YouTube if you want to follow him called Colin Robertson. I think I mentioned him last week. Caolan Robertson, just a young dude. He's a journalist, but he also interviews people who really know a lot about this situation. He's a really good guy to follow about that. There's others, but I'm not going to do all your homework for you. So, anyway, shall we move on to the other thing?
Yes, please.
So, which
This,
chart would you like in the middle?
um,
Do you want to look at the rally
yeah,
first?
let's look at the rally first because it's an astonishing chart.
It really is. I'll let you dive in because,
Well, okay, on July 17th, there are at least 400 rallies around the US. This is John Lewis's birthday, and they're good trouble rallies. And you can actually, if you run a search, there's an interactive map. You can put in a zip code, and it'll show you where all the rallies near there are taking place. And from my random survey, they seem to largely be later in the day. This is a weekday. So we're working with the rally that is set for Washington, D.C., because that seemed to be I just chose it because it seems symbolic. And this one has the angles of the U.S. Sibley chart, so it feels like this is perfectly chosen. And there are a number of truly, truly wonderful things happening. First off, look at Mercury at 15 degrees Leo. That's the retrograde station of Mercury. That's where it will station retrograde. So this has staying power. Whatever happens now, the messaging, the energy has staying power. That's thing one. And also
I just want to draw those aspects in.
it's trine series and sextile Venus. So that's beautiful.
Mhm.
Of the diverse people, Venus in Gemini, diverse people, diversity. I'm sorry,
Yeah.
including diversity. Okay. Oh, I'm so horrible. Uh, and that is on the U.S. descendant. All right. So,
And
so,
a reminder that Mercury is the ruler of Gemini, that
oh,
descendant too.
excellent. Yes,
So
yes, yes.
yeah, yeah.
Okay. So that's a big piece. Look at Chiron in the fifth house at 27 Aries. That is sextile the US moon. So
We'll put
this,
those two charts together in a minute. So,
maybe I should just go with what's in this chart. Okay, in this chart, notice that the moon is at 23. That's a nice number of Aries square the sun at 25. So there's a real demand for action, and the moon rules this situation because the moon rules Cancer. So there is something here about fighting for what you believe in, fighting for nurturing, fighting for your country.
can I
And
add? Can I add something on that one? Yeah.
yeah.
Yep. So to add to this, of course, the moon is the people. Fifth house is a joyful house, really. So I think these are going to be quite joyful rallies. But a reminder that Eris is just about to station retrograde too. So
And she's in the mix. She's exactly square the
yeah,
sun.
yeah, and she is good trouble. So and Chiron, key to healing as well as the wound. So well, it is. Go keep going. Yeah.
Well, and then Mars up there in the ninth house of policy, of legislation, of foreign relations. So you know that the whole ICE issue is going to be part of this, is closing in on the South Node. Now, that will be exact a couple of days later, but it'll be exact at the Leo new moon, actually. So around the 24th is when it's going to hit that, or on the 23rd, 24th, something like that. So this is teeing up two big things. It's this teeing up that let's deal with, let's clean up what's happening with all kinds of legislative and policy moves, and
Yeah.
also the fact that Mercury is sitting where it's sitting in the House of Secrets. There's something that's really being energized here. Mercury will be retrograde until the 11th of August. And so whatever is going on now it's got two fuses in it that show this is going to carry on for a while. The first one is Mars is heading for an exact conjunction with the South Node, and the second one is Mercury is just hanging out where it's about to go backwards and then
Yeah.
come forward again. So whatever is happening here isn't going to go away. And notice that Mercury is, I just picked this up, square Juno
I was
in
just
the
going to say
11th
that.
house.
Yeah.
So
So that
information
means
about money deals, maybe?
quite possibly. And of course, that means Juno is also speaking to these other planets. And Juno is kind of our sacred contracts with each other as well. And in the 11th house, groups, organizations, I always think of Juno in Scorpio as being kind of people kind of stepping into their own sense of empowerment. Like, you're not going to do this to us anymore, because Juno, the goddess, stood up for women's, children's rights, things like that. So just another layer of it. So they're all speaking to each other, these planets.
It's the House of Congress, too.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, yeah, yeah. And so also, of course, Ceres and Venus are in this sextile to each other, pointing at Juno as well, making Juno quite a focal point, really. So it's a amazing chart. And then you didn't even mention that those
No,
two
I
are.
did not.
I'll let you do it.
No, no, go ahead. Go ahead.
Well, Saturn and Neptune, we've already mentioned. Neptune is already, as we record, is already stationed retrograde, and Saturn on the 13th. But they're both stationing retrograde right on the base of the chart, which, to go back to what Kathy said about the angles, these are the exact angles of the USA chart. 12 degrees rising, but 1 degree at the top
Mhm.
and the base of the chart are the exact midheaven and IC or NADA of the USA chart. So that's a huge turnaround. Huge. Anyway,
And and they're in a sextile or an opportunity aspect to Pluto and Aquarius in the second
oh yeah.
house of our resources, but also our values. So there's a
And
dissolved.
yours.
Oh, and they're part of, yeah, okay, Uranus is part of it too. So there's a shift in how we're going about things. There's something here, it's radical revolution, and some of it is extraordinarily easy because Uranus and Pluto are both agents of change, and they have They have, there's nothing impeding what's going on between them. No, no, no. And there's the opening, the doorway, the opportunity for people to claim power and control, bringing their own beliefs into physical form. There's also, and I would like to talk about this when we put the US chart in the picture, this Saturn Uranus going, I mean, Saturn Neptune going over that part of the chart does seem to be dissolving what
Mm.
has been the foundation of life, country,
Yeah,
completely.
yeah, yeah,
So there is a demand here to rework things, and instead of running around, with your chicken with your head cut off, kind of reaction, this one is motivating people to stand up and say, "We want to nurture our people. We
yeah.
want a safe and protective country."
We want a system that feeds everybody's needs
Yes.
to go back to series and things like that as well. So, which chart would you like in the middle?
What do you think?
Well, it
Should this
doesn't.
be should this be the
Let's look at both. Let's put the
okay.
US there because this is, as just to because you just mentioned, people saying, we basically need a new constitution rewritten. We needed the system to work better for everybody. So I'll put the USA in the middle because this was Independence Day. Most people know we've been having the Pluto return and things, but this again, so much happening. But I will point out that, this is the basis of the USA's chart to go back to what we talked about there. And the chart is house-wise almost the same, but I'll let you go on and talk about the aspects. So.
Well, the fact that the angles are essentially identical indicates that this is a redefining moment.
Mhm.
These rallies are reclaiming Saturn and Neptune on the fourth. They're reclaiming control
Mhm. Mhm.
and demanding, or not even demanding. Well, yeah, they are demanding with the Moon and Eris squaring the sun in the sky on top of the U.S. Mercury, which is at 24. So there's a real messaging, a very, very strong messaging piece to what is happening in this event. But
Mhm.
notice that Chiron at 27 Aries, which is basically conjunct the moon and Eris. They're close enough. But Eris is
Yeah.
pulling the moon into this. Chiron is in a sextile to the US moon. This is speaking to the wounds of the people. This is the
Mhm.
people standing up, turning things over and saying, "No, you don't." I've been using the phrase "No, you don't," not on my watch a lot
Yeah.
lately, and this event has that. This is an event of reclaiming power, of embodying values, and
Mhm.
saying, "No, you don't."
Yep. And
Notice,
and
one more.
justice as well, because Pallas Athena's there.
Oh,
That's
well, that's beautiful. So
yeah.
this Moon Eris Chiron cluster is pulling in Pallas Athena, but look at Pallas Athena in the sky at 20 Aquarius in the second is exactly trine Juno
In the
in
USA.
the US chart.
Well,
So
in
there's,
fact, it's if you bring in Mars, it's an air grand trine. So,
well, isn't that
woohoo,
interesting?
isn't it? I
And
just
what's
saw that.
what's the open ally there? Venus in Gemini. I'm gonna say the feminine is really, really rising with this, but also all you people out there who've been sitting on your chairs on the edge of your seats, women politicians, the deals we had with women politicians getting more and more and more in focus. And this is another window where someone could be coming back into the news and really stepping into a leadership potential. And yes, that's who I'm talking about.
And
Hmm.
I would also love to mention, because when we looked at just the chart for the rally, I'm just going to clear the lines, we talked about this mini grand trine between Mercury, Venus, and Ceres, also bringing in Juno, but I'm not going to add that line on. But guess what? Saturn, the USA's Saturn, kind of the old rules, the patriarchy, if you like, is also at 14 degrees. I just spotted that one. And so that's a lovely aspect of opportunity from Mercury. It's an air trine, unbroken flow, as Kathy says, to Venus, and it's opposing series. Our needs met and unmet, and people standing up and saying, none of this is meeting our needs. None of it, basically.
This is really a call for the feminine to step up
Mhm. It,
and take over.
and I include in the feminine, all kind of marginalized groups, LGBTQ, people of color. So it's not just women, though I think it is a lot to do with women, but it's all of that. It's all that has been othered, really, I think, to use that expression. Mhm.
As this is brewing, um, oh, I just noticed two more things. But as this is brewing, uh, Justice Ketanji Brown Jackson has been in the news more and more for being very pointed in her dissents and what she's saying about what's going on.
Mhm.
And so she may be one of the people who says something truly stunning around the time of this. I mean, she's already been making some statements. But the other thing I just noticed, Jupiter at 8 degrees Cancer is exactly opposite Eris
Oh,
in. So that's the feminine really, really wanting to shake up what the structure is.
Eris shakes tables, She overthrows the tables. She's a bit like Jesus in the temple in many ways. I was just checking the degree that Mars and the South Node will meet at. It's at 19. That's widely square the Mars of the USA too. There's so much going on. And I kind of want to say I think a lot will be ignited on this day,
Hmm.
but because of these retrogrades, some of it will not kind of change till later, but things will start to emerge, I think. Don't you agree?
Oh, absolutely. As I said, this has incredible staying power, but what do you
Mm.
make of there's a grand trine running from Jupiter in Cancer in the sky, Vesta in
Oh,
Scorpio in the 11th house in the sky, and
oh, and
the US
Sirius
series.
in water signs. That's well, I always think of Jupiter and Cancer about our basis of security and needs, and because Jupiter expands everything, it's saying, that's adding to that thing about, we don't feel safe anymore, at all. Vesta, the hearth, the state in Scorpio, digging deep and quite honestly, probably excavating how none of this has ever kind of worked for the divine feminine, for want of a better way, hasn't met our needs, spiritual needs, of how we're all connected, everything is together. But the Grand Trine is, it can be a very flowy aspect, but it makes a lovely kite to Eris, which Grand Trines can be a bit kind of just don't go anywhere sometimes without conscious use, but not with Eris involved, is making a kite to Eris in the first house. I think that, the revolution is here in many ways. Like the people are just going to go, nope, not doing it. This is not happening. We can't do this. All those kind of things. And I know you mentioned Chiron being in aspect to the moon, but of course it's also square to the square Pluto. So
Absolutely.
my God, so much happening,
What
Kathy.
I want to
It's
say
just
about that water grand trine with Eris and Capricorn being the string of the kite, this is also a formula for more and more and more flooding, and
oh,
that just completely disrupting our concept of what things are supposed to be with uh, Eris and Capricorn representing the earth part, like earthquakes, things just going fluey, things going breaking here, this way, that way.
more
Um,
flash floods, more
Flash
yeah.
floods. And that will be part of what awakens,
Mm.
cracks people's hearts open, basically, and gives the emotional push there's so
Mm,
many things in here saying emotional push. I mean, the moon square the sun alone is, I will kick your teeth in.
mm.
The moon in Aries is, don't you dare. This is the mother throwing a car over to save her baby underneath it. I mean, there are so many really, really powerful motivators in this.
Oh,
This
so
day could not have been picked. There could not be, I can't see how there could have been a better time for these
I
rallies.
maybe they had an astrologer, yay! But also, I talked about the Mars South Node conjunction and what last happened last time. But this could, with all these other aspects, can quite honestly manifest in all these big storms and or floods and things because of climate change. And we see that the current regimes do not give a shit about climate change. They're reversing things, not just in the USA, but in some other places, with the oligarchy that's rising. People are just going to say, we have to adapt mutable signs, and we're not adapting because, and losing all those kids, those young kids. But like Kathy said at the news at the start, this is starting to happen in many, many places. People are going to feel that loss. Ceres saying, I associate Ceres with climate change because in the myth, when she lost Persephone, she caused a famine. So there's so much going on there about all these things. So it's not just about the politics. This is about what's happening in the world, basically. So, mhm.
What do you make of the fact that Vesta in the US chart is at 19 Taurus, which
Mm.
is exactly trine the South Node in Virgo
Oh boy.
currently, and Mars is
And
going to
when
hit
they
that.
meet, yeah. Well, Vesta is the state, and this is the US chart. So, we're seeing most of this flash flooding in the USA. So, and we're entering hurricane season. So, maybe there's probably, I hate to predict things, but weather shows up hugely in the astrology. There could be like an almighty hurricane by then, or more of this flash flooding, like even more devastating than we've seen already, to be quite honest.
And to counterbalance that with something a little more positive, Jupiter in Cancer being in this grand trine
Mm.
that is grounded with Eris in Capricorn in the first house could also speak to the size of the rallies and the fact that there are already so many
Oh,
of them
yeah.
planned all over the country. So that is another way that this
Mm.
plays out.
They could be way bigger than, the No Kings ones that were big anyway.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Because people are waking up. And as Kathy expressed in her news report at the start, it's not enough, it's a little trickle at the moment, but some Republicans are speaking out finally. I've seen an interview with Tillis, and he's still not my cup of tea, but he's, doing interviews and speaking out because he said he's not going to run for re-election. I think there's going to be a bigger flood after we're in this big tunnel of things appearing to be standing still, as Kathy said. Yeah. And in other ways as well. So please don't fear, the weather disasters. We know they've been increasing for how long. The hurricanes have been getting bigger and bigger and hitting weird places like Asheville, that was. And I think people are waking up to the fact that this is a time we've kind of gone too far with climate change, no matter what caused it, and we have to start adapting to go back to the mutables. So, mhm.
And to wrap all of this up, it's this summer is showing us, or this stretch of time is
Mm,
showing us that the outer conditions are different. And this summer, we are starting to experiment with how we're going to meet
mm,
these differences. And the Leo new moon, which I guess we will talk about in our next one more.
mm.
We Louise laid out what's going on in that. But the Leo new moon is a time when everybody on the inside and possibly many of us collectively are going to say, all right, here's our next approach. Here's what we do.
And just to project a little bit ahead, it's an aspect I mentioned already, just to, to give people hope. We do have that Venus, Jupiter, Sirius, which is a fortunate fixed star at 14 degrees Cancer on August the 12th, which is not far away, and that's right on the sun of the USA chart. And so I think this waking up and this demand for change is, as soon as the planets start moving, I think the change is going to start coming really fast. Do you?
Really fast. I agree. I agree.
Mm-hmm.
So I'll leave you with this thought. Uranus and Gemini. Now that Uranus is in Gemini, Gemini is a sign of duality too. And
Mm-hmm.
I say this in next week's forecast, and I'm saying it now. A part of you
And I
is
did a
living,
whole video about Uranus too. So yeah, go on.
but a
Yeah.
part of us, you can look at it as a part of you is living in the way the world is right now. But a part of your
Mhm.
thinking can live in a different world. So I encourage everybody to spend more time in the concepts or the actual experience of the world you want to be in and less time with the other one because the other one is going away. And this, we're in a gateway where we get to like stick our parts of our body, or might even think of it as a science fiction portal where a part of you is going through something and you can't quite see what's on the other side, but you're starting to get the visceral sense of what it's going to feel like. So we're kind of going in and out through this right now. Let your brain do that. And I cannot stress enough. Find people who make you feel glad to be alive. Gravitate
Yeah.
to activities that make you feel glad to be alive. This is not trivial. This fuels you so that you can go back into the fight, fight for people who are not in the privileged position that you are. And I would suggest that a vast number of us are strangely protected right now. And that means it's up to us to really amp up our efforts for the people who are in the line of fire. And part of that requires that you periodically go lie on the ground, that you periodically
Do your self-care.
go to a
Yeah.
movie, go listen to music, go play games with your friends, go outside, eat ice
But can
cream.
I add one thing, seeing as we looked at these protests on the day, the good trouble? Think of the words of that good trouble, that energy of it. Gemini is fun and community and very youthful. Don't go with that. And Uranus is about thinking outside the box, right? So, whatever your part is in this thing, approach it with to quote a mutual friend of ours, operate from joy, and come at it with that. I'm going to dance, I'm going to sing and protest, because then you're also less likely to get arrested or something. So
And I have an inspirational image for this. In 1990, I was living in Houston when the Republican National Convention took over my neighborhood. And we all had different jobs. I will happily tell you what mine were. They were quite fun, quite fun. But well, no, I will tell you one of them. Somebody printed up giant red bumper stickers that said "Stop," and they were in the same type, the same font. I'm sorry, that said Bush, and they were in the same font as the stop signs. So I drove the getaway car, and we stuck these things on stop signs, including like the closest stop sign to George W. Bush's residence. It was great. That was so much fun. But this is what I want to tell you about. A lot of my friends worked the Planned Parenthood clinic. I couldn't do it. I could not expose myself to the level of absolute fury and hate that was coming off the people who were attacking the clinic. But friends of mine did, and the best thing they did was lock arms, and they decided they were going to sing theme songs from Saturday morning cartoons. This completely discombobulated. They saw somebody who was standing on a car and they started singing Flintstones, meet the Flintstones. And this guy he ended up falling through the windshield of his car. So discombobulate them by having fun. They won't know what to do with it.
exactly my point. Yeah, yeah. And that's very so Uranus in Gemini. So, just ponder on that and please go to the protests. I am not much for marching anymore, but this one I'm going to because it has such a great vibe, and I think we all need to turn out as if you're physically able. So anyway, until next week, and honestly, things are going to start changing fast.
Fast,
Bye.
fast, fast. Bye.